of the man he is. You make me want to be a better man. I know he'll probably tell you that he was bullied as a kid. He probably won't tell you that the only kid that bullied him was Chuck Norris. And that bullying stopped when he got in kindergarten and kicked his ass. Nick Lavery once threw a grenade and killed 50 men. Then he pulled the pin. Please give a warm welcome to my little brother, Nick Lavery.
All right. Let's see. Are we live on this? We're not live on this. You know what? We don't even need this. It works. If not, we're all good. Oh, look at that. Technology. I love it when it plays out. How's everybody feeling? Everybody good? Amazing stuff. Nick, where'd you just go? There you are. Unbelievable, brother. I've known you now for several years. I didn't get to hear that in-depth background. I knew the wave tops. You're a very humble guy. You're a modest guy. I'm impressed with not only what you've been through, but your ability to get up there and share that, with the world. I know how difficult that can be. Certainly someone who takes pride in being a choir professional, being a man of action, and yet somehow you've gotten to the point where you can get up here and talk about something that few of us can possibly conceptualize in a way as if you were just talking about the weather. I know that doesn't come easy, brother, so I appreciate your respect. Give it up one more time for Mr. Dick. All right, I'll stand. So I'll give a quick introduction. As Nick said, so my name is Nick Lavery. I'm an active duty Green Beret with the United States Army Special Forces. This is something I've been doing now just shy of 20 years, which is crazy when you say it out loud how fast it goes by. Just real quick, show of hands, any veterans, current active duty service members, or those that are family members or such? Throw your hand up, high and proud. Outstanding. Thank you all for your service. So at least most of the room can attest to how fast it does really go by when you serve for 10 minutes, 10 years, or 30 years. And to say that I love what I do would be something of a wild understatement. In fact, I consider it to be one of the greatest privileges a person can take on to dedicate themselves to a society in which we will defend at all costs. But I love what I get to do. Second to that, again, just quick introduction, and more significantly than that, at least to me, is I am a husband and I'm a father. My wife is actually also active duty special operations. She's actually been at this longer than me, coming up on 25 years, and she just actually started retiring officially a couple months ago. So I have a very unique vantage point of being alongside her and supporting her as she's going through a really difficult point in her life. And what I've gleaned from this, witnessing her going through this transition, as someone who's leading on her own terms, someone who's an absolute unicorn, an amazing asset, therefore there's countless opportunities and options that she has at her disposal, almost too much, where that can almost be a problem in of itself. But even when all those stars seem to be aligned, it's still really hard for most of us to hang up the uniform. So what this has enabled me is just a little extra bit of perspective into the individual who is leaving military service under, say, less than optimal circumstances. Perhaps that's due to an injury. Perhaps that's due to some poor choice that was made. Perhaps they felt they could have served longer, and for whatever reason their time is being cut short. You can imagine how difficult it can be when it's this hard for someone who's leaving with all the things working in her favor. We are the proud parents of 2 young boys. My oldest is 8, my youngest just turned 4. My youngest's birthday is on St. Patrick's Day. So tell me he doesn't have some wild birthdays coming down the pipe in the not so distant future, God help us all. Any fellow parents here in the room by any chance? Yeah, quite a bit. You want to talk about something that'll change your perspective on some things like that, right? I mean, that moment when you're holding that little slug thing for the first time, a little glowworm, it's just all of a sudden, all the things in the world that seem to be the most important things ever, just in that moment, all of a sudden just don't really seem to matter all that much. And of course, we continue to live life and we're inundated with priorities and responsibilities and obligations and passions, but I do think that those of us that have the privilege of having gone through parenthood are given an amazing gift. That gift is that gift of perspective. And at this point in my young dad life, again, 8 and 4, both boys, they're both absolute savage maniacs, for sure. I'm convinced, actually, at this point, they both wake up every day with one or both of these thoughts in mind. The first is, what's a new and creative way I can try to hurt myself? And then the second is, what's a new and creative way I can try to hurt my brother? And that just goes on a loop, 24/7, 365, always open for business. And I sit back trying to figure out where and when to step in from stopping a potential disaster from happening. And it's like, this just happened actually like a week ago. Like, this one's holding a baseball bat, which could probably cause a little bit of damage. But this one also kind of asked for it, too, a little bit. So maybe I don't want to rob him of this impressive, important lesson in physics that he is so desperately begging for. And I sit there trying to figure out where and when to step in. And, I shared some of those insights into my personal life, really not just solely to give you a glimpse of who I am outside of my profession, but because those 3 people are really at the core of the answer to the 2 questions I get asked most often, which are different variations of the how and the why. So how do you do what you do, or how did you do X, Y, Z? Or maybe a more important question to ask is why? Why did you do that, or why do you do this? Okay, those 2 questions are 2 that we're actually going to examine here a little bit over the next 35, 40 minutes. But just know for me on the upfront, at the center of both of those questions is my wife and our 2 boys. And then lastly, just to round out this quick basic introduction, I will address the elephant in the room. It's the thing that's on everybody's mind for sure. That way we can just handle it and we can move forward with business. I am from Boston, Massachusetts. So, the cat is officially out of the bag. I know, I'm sure there's a lot of shocked people in the room right now. Do I happen to have any fellow massholes here in the room with me? I'm just one? Oh, you guys are killing me right now. 2, okay, we're evening things out a little bit, perfect. So, if at some point I say something crazy, you have no idea what I just said, reference these 2 guys, or maybe think about the movie The Departed or Good Will Hunting, try to put yourself in that space, and then maybe we can figure out what I'm talking about. Okay. I typically like to begin by answering the question, why did I just sort of decide to join the United States military? And this photograph right here really just answers that question, probably in its totality. In fact, I'm willing to bet most people in the room right now don't really need me to say another word, and you kind of just get it, right? I will give a little bit additional context. When this happened, I was a 19-year-old college football player. I watched this event happen live, and much like Nick, I really had never experienced that amount of rage and anger ever before in my life. I felt like I was under attack. I felt like planes were flying into me. And kind of the ironic part about that was, I've been in military service now almost 20 years. Back then, I did not have this red, white, and blue coursing through my veins like I do today. I was very much a typical 19-year-old college athlete knucklehead. But I was proud to be an American. And I can remember watching my fellow countrymen make the choice between burning alive in a building or jumping out of it. And that just did not sit well with me. Right? That's just not gonna work. So I really struggled to stay in school. I met with my academic advisor. I was dead set on dropping out. Ultimately, I did decide to stay in, grind out the rest of my degree, and then begin looking at options to enlist not long after graduation. Decided to go the route of the Army Special Forces. I came in as what's known as an 18 X-ray, otherwise known as a Special Forces recruit, which gave me a contract option for me to bypass any kind of military service in the conventional Army, go straight into the Special Forces pipeline, and after about 2 or so years of training was when I earned my Green Beret, got to my team, and then I went to work. It was on my 3rd trip into Afghanistan in the fall of 2012 that I would be wounded in action on 3 separate occasions. The first, about 3 weeks after we arrived, was when I was wounded for the first time and took some grenade shrapnel to the back of my shoulder, as you might be able to see in that photograph right there. Blew about a lemon-sized hole in me. Sounds a lot worse than it was, to be honest. Really nothing less than gauze, an ace bandage, and a pressure dresser really couldn't take care of. About 12, 14 hours later, eventually I was medevaced out to get seen by a doctor. Took a look at it, taught me and my medics how to treat it, and about 3 or 4 days after that, I was back with the guys, just right back to work. Fast forward from this moment, maybe 6, 7 weeks, was when I was wounded for the second time, and it was here that I took an AK-47 round to the face. Now I know that's an unusual thing to hear. More often than not, someone takes a rifle round to the face, not there to tell you about it. So I obviously got very, very lucky. It really just grazed the side of my cheek. It did crack my orbital bone into a few pieces. It nicked an artery, so it bled quite a bit. But in the context of what was going on around me at the time, this was literally nothing more than a scratch. See, 6 of my friends, as we made our way back from an operation, drove into about a 400-pound roadside bomb that just decimated their vehicle. All 6 of them were fighting for their lives. In this photograph right here, and I apologize for the poor quality, this was actually just a screenshot taken from one of my teammates that was wearing a GoPro helmet camera. The gentleman on the bottom right of that screen was actually one of our attachments. His name is John. John was in that lead vehicle. And this, what you're seeing here, is after we consolidated all the wounded and we got them to a casualty collection point and began rendering aid. I had just finished actually putting John's eyeball back into his skull, which was hanging out down kind of around his cheek. What I like to highlight about this is, had I been wounded and no one else had been, things would have been seen much differently. I would have been treated much sooner. But in the context of that scenario, when 6 of our friends are all fighting for their lives, I'm talking limbs are blown off, eyes are falling out of heads, severe internal blast damage, guys are suffocating on collapsed lungs, all 6 really should have died. None of them did. In that scenario, nobody cares about Nick right now. Nobody. Particularly myself. And it's not because they don't care for me. These guys love me, and I love them. But there are more pressing matters at hand. And to me, this highlights the importance of really 2 things. One is the importance of training. You're not getting around that. We train deliberately, with intent, with intention, full scale, as close to reality as we can get. That repetition, those purposeful practice reps, is what enables us to make those really hard choices in real time. But the second component to that, which I think goes largely unnoticed, is the power of an emotion that we have, that if once we choose to deploy it on purpose, enables us to do what really needs to be done in this scenario. The ironic part about this is, it is arguably the most powerful emotion that we have. And it's one that military community members, law enforcement, first responders, even pro athletes, these type A aggressive go-getter individuals, usually want nothing to do with. In fact, when I say it right now, people are going to start to squirm around in their seats. Okay? Because that emotion I'm talking about is love. Arguably the most powerful one that we have that exists within this emotional entity known as a human being. The love of a teammate, the love of a brother. Yeah, I know what the right thing is to do because I've trained on it thousands of times, but what also enables me to do that is in that moment, I care more about you than I care about myself, period. Well, fast forward from this moment a little bit, maybe now another 3 or 4 months, ratcheting out towards the tail end of this deployment. So we infilled in September. We were set to leave in April, 6-month trip. It's now March of 2013. And those that I just totally lost, March is the month that comes after February. Okay? 2 guys in the room knew what I just said. Everyone else was like, what the hell is a March? It's a month. There we go. We're all on the same page. March 11th, actually, to be precise. And just prior to us loading up our vehicles, at this point, guys, we are beat up, we are tired, we've been going at it 5.5 months. Most of the guys on my team have been wounded in action at least once. We're ready to go home. But there's, of course, work to be done, so we're getting ready to go to work. Prior to us loading up our vehicles to begin making movement towards our target, a member of the Afghan National Police Force, a guy that we've been working with for months, climbed up on the back of a Ford Ranger pickup truck, had a mounted PKM bell-fed machine gun attached to it, that one right there, and opened fire into me and my friends from about 30 feet away. Several military people in this room right now. Some may be familiar with the PKM. Those unfamiliar, this is a very powerful weapon system. It's a Russian-made belt-fed machine gun. This gun could rip a vehicle to shreds from 400 or 500 meters away, no problem. From 30 feet, which is basically me to that table right there, against human flesh, and it is quite catastrophic. 12 US casualties total, including 3 of which were killed. One of those was our detachment commander, Captain Andrew Peterson Keel from Connecticut, was standing directly next to me moments before the round started flying, took 2 rounds to his face, dead instantly. 2 others killed, myself another 8 varying degrees of wounded. And to make matters a little bit more interesting, this was the initiation of a pre-planned complex ambush. What we didn't know, there were about 30 Taliban fighters that had our compound essentially entirely surrounded. So when this guy initiated from inside our perimeter, they all began launching mortars, RPG rockets, and unloading belt-fed machine gun down on top of us. It was a really bad day at the office. Those that were upright, they go to work and they begin repelling this ambush. I'm really in no position to address that, so I take a look at what I'm dealing with. Rip what's left of my right pant leg open to see my leg, and really, my leg really didn't look much like a leg at this point. It looked more like something that had gone through a meat grinder, or like a shark had gotten a hold of and just kind of ripped it to shreds. I took an estimated 5 or 6 rounds to my right leg, which basically vaporized it. Exposed bone, exposed tissue, parts of my leg actually looked like it was almost turned inside out, and there is a river of blood that is pouring out of my body. Now guys, when I say a river, I mean a river. I imagine turning on a sink faucet or a garden hose at like mid to high strength and just letting it flow. That's the amount of volume that is pumping out of me. So I know at this point, 2 things to be true without question. The first is your femoral artery has definitely been cut, which means you might have 8 or so minutes to live. Cool, roger that, got it. The second thing I know to be true, and again, I believe this with certainty, is that this is where you will die. And that is a very unusual, unique, emotional roller coaster ride to go on. And I was on that ride. Fortunately for me, I was able to get off that ride relatively quickly because I had a whole lot of work to do and I didn't have a whole lot of time to do it. So I grabbed a tourniquet off my equipment, strap it on, lock it in. Bleeding doesn't slow down at all. Said, cool, grab a second tourniquet, pull that off, strap it on, lock it in. Bleeding looks like it may have slowed down a little bit, but it certainly hasn't stopped. And right around now, one of my teammates gets to me. His name is Jason. Technically, Jason was an attachment, but he was with us prior to deployment all the way throughout. We've been through a lot together. Very much considered a teammate. The look on Jason's face really confirmed everything I already knew to be true, which is, this is where you will die. And I can remember trying to convince Jason to go work on somebody else, both verbally and physically. Trying to physically, and I'm yelling at him to get off of me. I had put myself into what we would refer to as the expectant category of triage. Everybody's familiar with the term triage. Basically nothing more in a mass casualty scenario than when you're organizing patients based off of priority. And that gives those of us that are rendering aid just a system to work within. Expectant patients being at the end of that, and barring some sort of unlikely event, some may choose to use the word miracle, expectant patients will die. And you do not invest precious moments or resources on expectant patients unless or until you have worked your way through all the other priorities. At this point in my career, I have been on both sides of the triage equation multiple times. And I can assure you, for those that have never been in that scenario, and I pray that you never are, that abiding by that protocol is the most difficult decision I have ever had to make in my life by a mile. When someone that you consider a brother is laying there, in pain, hurt, scared, and dying, and asking you for help, and you intentionally ignore that in order to work on somebody that's been deemed a higher priority. It is a brutal protocol to follow. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. And I had been there before. So in my mind, I was really trying to help Jason make that really high choice. He kind of ignored me to a degree. He added a third tourniquet. He got IV access for blood or medication. And at that point, he was pretty much at the end of his medical capability. So we said a quick goodbye, seemingly for the last time, and then he moved on. He had a lot of work to do. So I'm laying there. Things are exploding around me. Gunfire is ripping off the truck behind me. Our guys are returning fire. Aircraft start showing up on scene. It's complete and total chaos. People are screaming. People are dying. I say to myself, man, I think you're still bleeding out. Well, I go to try to lift my leg up off the ground to see if I can notice any blood coming out of one of the entry wounds that I was hit from behind. Well, my femur had been shattered into about 18 pieces. So lifting it up under its own power was not going to happen. So I grab it with my hands and I just pull it up. And sure enough, I see blood pouring out of me. And I said to myself, well, shit. That's not good, right? I only have so much of that red stuff in. So I said, is there anything else I can do here? Do I have any other options? And the answer was, yeah. I had really one last trick up my sleeve. So I reach into my personal first aid kit. I pull out some gauze. I ball it up in what we call a power ball, which really just gives gauze a little bit of density to work with. Basically creating a golf ball out of gauze. Loosen up the highest tourniquet. I'm now staring at one of the exit wounds, which is typically a much larger hole. And I ram this into the wound and up towards my hip in order to feel for the pulse of the femoral artery, in order to get direct pressure on the artery itself. Much easier said than done. Right? When arteries are severed, they will typically retract. So I got an opening here, but where I need to get to is more like up here. So basically, at some point, I look down and half my fist is inside my leg, which is a very unusual thing to experience, to say the least. At some point, I think I feel something. I kind of just say to hell with it. I press down as hard as I can. I feed all the rest of the gauze into the cavity on top of that. Secure a tourniquet on top of the gauze, and then boom, I go unconscious. I come to maybe a minute later. I look at the work I had done. I have no idea if it did anything, but I am totally out of options. So now the next question is, how do you want to spend the rest of your life? Which for me, I was convinced I had maybe 10, 12, 15 seconds. How are you going to choose to invest those seconds? I decided to drag myself over, maybe about 10, 12 feet, to where some of my teammates were that were wounded. First guy I got to was our senior medic. His name is Elliot. Elliot had taken a round through his calf. Stable condition, tourniquet applied, but feeling every ounce of discomfort that comes with a properly applied tourniquet. Okay? I mean, tourniquets save lives, period. An amazing piece of medical equipment. But when done right, it sucks. And many of you probably know that. Hopefully, all of you know that. So he's feeling every ounce of that. And I just figure, I'll do what I can to kind of distract him, thank him for everything he did for me as a teammate, everything he did for me as a medic. Thank him for everything he taught me as a man. And that's how this game of life would end for me. And I was surprisingly okay with that. Sure enough, 10, 20 seconds later, my peripheral vision starts to go, kind of looking through a soda straw, fade to black, game over. And then boom, my eyes wide open, staring at the sky, screaming, yelling, explosions, gunfire. I kind of look around and I say, I'm back. That's kind of cool, right? I mean, I'll take it. Wasn't expecting that, but we're gonna call this a win. Rinse and repeat that process about a dozen or so times. Each time he convinced that this was it. It actually almost kind of got annoying, right? It's like, okay, for real, this time, this one really is it. Okay, it's gotta be. And then boom, I'm back again, and I'm like, what the hell's going on, man? I'm just not going down. At some point I come to, I'm being carried on a stretcher, being loaded on a helicopter. And at this point, those that are controlling this medevac scenario have a couple options to choose from. Turns out it had been over an hour and a half since I'd initially been hurt before I could get on a bird. So that 8-minute clock that I had started had long since come and gone. So now some decisions need to be made. What they decide to do is take the first 2 lifts, so the first 2 helicopters of wounded patients, 3 patients on each, 6 patients total, and fly them to the closest medical assets to us. To a location at an outpost that has what's referred to as a forward surgical team, otherwise known as an FST or a FAST team. These are an amazing military resource. These are medical professionals that are capable of performing medicine, including surgery, in more austere, remote environments outside of the hospital. These guys are unbelievable at what they do. The closest trauma doctors to us. Get those 6 guys there now, and then send everybody else to Bagram. There's a reason why I'm sharing this detail. 6 patients puts that fast team at capacity. I'm on one of those first lifts. When I tell you guys that when I arrived at this outpost that I was out of blood, I mean that I was literally out of blood. In fact, I've learned some details about this just as recent as like 18 months ago that are still really hard for me to digest. I'm talking about paperwork from guys that physically worked on me on this day. For the sake of time, just know, completely out of blood. They rip me off the bird, they throw me on a transfusion, bring me into surgery, and begin putting my femoral artery back together. Well, it's about 2 or 3 minutes after that procedure is done that all of what's left of my vitals begin to just completely tank. My liver, my kidneys, my lungs, my heart, everything is dying. No one knows what the problem is, but they can no longer work on me. 5 of my friends are in beds next to me, dying. They have to divert their attention to them. They say, we don't know what's going on with Nick. Get him on a helicopter and fly him to Bagram, which most of you probably recall at the time. Massive military base, full-scale hospital, all the resources, all the widgets, all the things you could need. So that's what they do. From where I was to Bagram was about a 12-minute flight by helicopter. And it's when I'm around halfway there that they realized that they had just pumped me full of 6 units of an incompatible blood type. And that's what was killing me. Now, when I share that little story, that is the response I get 100 times out of 100. And chances are, right now, you're all thinking one or both of these things. The first is, you gotta be kidding me. Nick, that's what you were thinking, right? Of course, that would be a reasonable response. And then the second is perhaps, how does that even happen? Don't you guys have like protocols in place? Don't they check and recheck? Don't you have dog tags and Velcro patches and duct tape with your blood type all over you? And the answer is yes, we actually have all of those things. They clearly all failed. I will share with you very quickly as to how that happened. Me and one of my teammates, we were on beds next to each other. We have similar last names, and they just confused who we were. That's it. A simple mistake that really anybody could make. And I like to take this moment here quickly to remind us all of something that we already really know. And that is, you can have all the determination, the discipline, the work ethic, the values, the ethics, the morals. You can have all those boxes checked, which I would say would be a great thing to do. And yet, despite that, people make mistakes, right? Nobody's perfect. Nobody is perfect. Particularly when you're operating under enormous amounts of stress, trying to save the lives of 5 Americans. People messed up, and that's what happened. You now may be curious to know, well, what happened to your teammate? Well, Owen, which is his name, happens to be blood type AB negative. Can anybody take a guess as to why that's relevant in this story? Thank you so much. AB negative is also known as the universal recipient, which means they can receive blood from anybody, and they're totally good to go. Less than 3% of people on planet Earth are blood type AB negative, and this lucky prick happens to be one of them. And you can't even make something like this up. So while Owen is soaking up all my delicious protein-enriched blood, feeling totally good to go, I have his toxic bullshit flowing through my body, and it's killing me. Something that he and I joke about to this day, literally. So they realize what happened. I'm 6 minutes out on a helicopter. I'm gonna recite for you the radio transmission that was sent from that outpost to Bagram and then relayed to the helicopter. It goes like this. They explained the situation on what they just did. Okay, got it, roger that. They said, it is impossible for Nick to survive this flight to me. They used the word impossible. You get a lot of people that are in the military, was in the military. That is not a word that you will hear during the execution of military operation ever. There is no such thing. We will find a way to get that done. But that's what they said. It is impossible for Nick to survive this flight to you. There is nothing the medics on board will be able to do. There's nothing you will be able to do when he gets there. He will be dead on arrival. Be prepared to receive his body. That was the radio transmission. And actually, my now wife was deployed to Bagram at that time and was on the receiving end of that call. The response was, okay, roger that. Eventually, I arrived at Bagram. I'm basically just a lump of flesh. They pull me in, they hook me up to every machine there is. I'm intubated, I'm on a breathing tube, I'm on dialysis, I'm on a fresh blood type with the right blood type, which I've heard is a good thing, allegedly. And I remained in a state in which doctors refer to as kinda alive for about a week. And it was like the 5th time I heard a doctor tell me that, but I'm like, dude, hold on a second. I've heard this kinda alive thing like 5 times. Is that like an official term that they teach you in med school? And he was like, yeah, pretty much, that's it. And I was like, okay, cool, I guess we'll just go with that. Basically, what we believe to be incapable of supporting human life according to technology, there's actually a bit of a gap in between that and actual death. It's like gray space in between the two. And I basically just hung out there for about 8 days. And then I just kind of came back. And that's really the only way I can really explain that. To fast forward through this a little bit quicker, I would eventually arrive at Walter Reed, where this photograph was taken right here. Went straight to the intensive care unit because I was battling essentially all of the infection that had set into my body. Any one of them could kill me. And things were real touch and go. My mother was there, my father was there, my younger sister was there. And Walter Reed, those that have yet to experience it, is really an amazing location. Oftentimes I refer to it as the greatest place on earth that you never want to see. Because chances are if you're there, unless of course you're working there, it means something perhaps not so great has happened to you or someone you care about. But it really does highlight just how fortunate we are as Americans and as service members to have that level of care being thrown at you literally 24 hours a day. It almost gets to the point as a patient where it gets annoying. You want people to just stop helping you. Like, just leave me alone. Like, give me a minute, let me sleep. It's constant, which is amazing. So it's this whirlwind of activity while I'm in this room in the intensive care unit. I'm on all the pain management drugs, including a little thing known as ketamine. Anybody familiar with that? Yeah, you want to talk about a wild ride? Ketamine will take you on. There was a point in time, as I'm on massive doses of ketamine and Dilaudid, that there was this like pinkish colored leprechaun creature living in the top corner of my room. And we were having like in-depth discussions about stuff. We were like figuring things out. It was like, oh, the whole like world hunger problem, like we definitely just wrapped that up. Like, what else you got? So I like barely know what's real, what's not. It's a nonstop flow of activity. At some point, I'd been there maybe 3 or 4 days. And all of a sudden, into my room comes a whole bunch of people wearing black suits, and they kind of set themselves up around the room. So of course I know immediately that I'm about to be abducted by aliens. And this is going to be a very interesting story, should I make it back to Earth at some point. And then, in walks the First Lady, which at the time was Michelle Obama. And there's really no mistaking her. Very distinct figure. And I'm whacked out of my mind, but I'm convinced there was almost this like aura around her as she just walked into the room. She walks in, she comes straight to me. She starts talking to me. I'm laying in this bed. She's talking to me. I have no idea what she's saying. I really have no recollection as I stand here now as to what I said back. I just recall mumbling and stuttering some kind of nonsensical gibberish back to her. So she's kind of like, okay, I'm not really getting anywhere with this dude right now. He's making precisely no sense. So I think I'm going to start talking to his mother. So her and my mother are having this conversation kind of right over the top of me. And at some point, I interrupt them. And I say, excuse me, ma'am. And I say it so loudly and I say it so clearly that it like startled her. She like jumped back. She's like, oh, this dude like totally just said something. That's pretty cool. So she leans in really, really close. She's like a foot off my face. And I said, I need you to do me a favor. She doesn't respond. I said, I need you to tell your husband that I'm still an asset. That I will be back, and don't give up on me. And she just starts crying. So she's crying, my mother starts crying, I think the Secret Service agents start crying, the leprechaun starts crying, like every one or thing in the room is having this emotional moment, except for me. I was just dead serious. In fact, if I'm being honest with you guys, I simply saw this as a strategic opportunity to get a message to the guy. That was it. If you've been in the military longer than a day or two, you realize that there is an exception to every policy. All it takes is the right person to put the name on the right piece of paper, and boom, anything can happen. And what this highlights to me is, despite me really not knowing much at all, what was real, what was not, where I was, what my condition was, the one thing that I could see crystal clear was my mission. I knew exactly what I was going to do. And that is, I was going to go back to the teams. I was going to go back to living the life I was put on this planet to live. It's important to know, and things have changed for me a little bit since. I mentioned perspective, becoming a dad. Things change as we progress. This is over 12 years ago now. But at that time, being a Green Beret, being a professional warfighter on behalf of the society really wasn't what I did. It was who I was. My entire identity was wrapped up in this one function. That was it. So I saw things very, very simply. Option A is you roll over and die. Option B is you figure out a way to get back to doing what you do. And in case you guys haven't already figured it out by now, I don't do very well with the whole rolling over and dying thing. So there's only one other option on the table, that's it. And at that moment, with the First Lady, I figured I'm probably gonna need a little bit of administrative support on this journey, okay? I'll take a shot. Maybe he'll listen to her. What I've come to realize to be a real hard truth, as me and my team get to travel the country and spend time with a variety of different organizations and a lot of different people, the hard truth is, how many people, in fact, I would argue most, are floating through life day in, day out without knowing what their mission is. It's sad. It's a sad reality. Individuals with just no sparkle behind their eye, no passion, no purpose, no drive towards something, just day in, day out, monotonous, going through the motions. In my opinion, simply waiting for the inevitable. That is death. Here's the powerful reality about identifying your mission, is once you plant a flag into the future to serve as a beacon, to serve as a target, to begin moving towards, it allows you to proceed all energy to the how am I going to do this question. Because that what am I going to do question does not ever stop until you answer it. Whether that's on the back end of a bad day at the office, a difficult conversation with your spouse that didn't go all that great, an injury to your ankle, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? We've all been there. You know what? We're all going to be there again. It's part of life. But the instant you can answer that question, now we're just talking about an equation. That's it. It's an equation, and I already know the answer because I said what the answer is. There is a way to solve for that answer. 3 plus x equals 4. Pretty easy to solve for x at that point. That may be the only utility in algebra I've ever had in my entire life, but it made sense to me then and it makes sense to me now. That's all I gotta do. I gotta turn one variable into a constant over and over and over and over and over and over again, and eventually I will turn that desired end state into a reality. That's it. And people tend to overthink this whole mission concept. They tend to overthink it. Like they have to find the perfect one. This paralysis by analysis. I just gotta read one more book. I gotta listen to one more podcast. I need one more hour doom scrolling on TikTok. Like, yeah, that's where you're gonna find the answer for sure. It's gotta be perfect. Spoiler alert, guys. There is no such thing as a perfect mission, period. And here's another truth. No matter what it is going to change anyway. And I'll prove it to you right now. 3 things will happen. One is you accomplish it, and now you're on to the next one. The second is while en route to achieving it, you realize, you know what? I've learned a couple things on the way. I'm a different person than I am today than I was yesterday and last month. I think I may want to redirect in this direction. I think that's it. We've all been there. Does that mean that all the work and ethic and sacrifices and knowledge transfer that you've earned over time while pursuing that one thing is now all for nothing? No, of course not. You wouldn't be positioned to make that pivot unless you had done it to begin with. And the third alternative, which is the more unfortunate one, is you just drop dead, which can happen. I don't want to end this on a sour note, but it's one thing we all know to be true. This game will end. And to that point, I want to highlight that hard truth. If we can all agree that this game that we're all living here right now in this room, this game known as life, is one, a gift, and two, finite, meaning it will end, the only question really is, why not leave it all out on the field? What do you really have to lose? This is not a dress rehearsal. That's it. We got one shot at this and it's over forever. Why not go big? Is it going to be scary? Yup. Is it going to be hard? Absolutely. Are you going to fail over and over and over and over and over again? Yes, because you need to. That's the only way to make it real. But I would argue that it is worth it. I saw my mission in this bed, in this room, as I was still fighting for my life. Well, fast forward from here, after about a year at Walter Reed, I went through about 40 or so surgeries on my right leg as I was just incrementally amputating it piece by piece. Eventually get that under control. I returned back to my unit at the time, was 3rd Group out of Fort Bragg with my man over here. Found myself in what would end up being about an 8-month administrative street fight with the United States Army, who really did their best to force me to become a civilian. So I dig my heels in, refused that answer. Yes, I have 2 heels. You can all chuckle if you want. Refused that end state. And when I say that I went truly all in on this, I meant that. I had to temporarily burn some relationship bridges as I circumvented the chain of command a couple, 2, 3 dozen, maybe or so times. But I figured, you know what? What are they going to do? Kick me out of the Army? You're actively trying to do that right now. Let me tell you something. When you go up against someone who truly has nothing to lose, or at least fully believes that they have nothing to lose, you are dealing with a very dangerous individual. And when that can be wielded towards something positive, you better get on board or get the hell out of the way. That was where I was at. I'm all in. There is no plan B, there is no contingency, there's no backup. When I say burn the boats, I mean literally burn the boats. That's it. One of 2 things is going to happen. I'm going to make this vision a reality, or I'm going to die trying. And I am surprisingly fine with either of those outcomes. I'm already on borrowed time anyway. So why not? And during this time, I was working as an instructor, teaching combatives, military term for hand-to-hand combat. Living my life in a way which could very easily be described as complete and total insanity. You guys have this book in front of you right now titled Objective Secure. In that book, you will see what a typical 24-hour period looked like for me during this time. If you choose to take a look at that, your first thought will likely be, this guy is crazy. And that's fine. Admittedly, I kind of was. Truly had lost my marbles at least a little bit. But I believe that that's what it was going to take. When I say that I got rid of every single task and relationship that was in my life at that time that was not directly correlated with being that one outcome of reality, those were removed. That was it. And it's one thing to remove an hour of Netflix a night when you get home. I get how difficult that can be. Or a glass of wine. Or a night out with your friends. One weekend a month. Giving up tasks is difficult. But in my opinion, it pales in comparison to giving up relationships. I'm talking about people who are energy drainers in your life. We all have them, almost certainly. Those are real hard choices to make. And I had to make that several times. I'm talking about guys that I was in high school with, long-standing relationships with. That during this phase, I just had to zoom out and take a look at who was in my circle. And I realized 2 things. One is you don't need a big circle, you need a strong circle. Period. And 2 is, you know what? I have to start cutting some of this dead weight. I have to. If you are not pouring kerosene on my fire, you are removed from the circle. That's it. And I told myself with basically all these individuals that it was going to be a temporary thing. You know what, brother? I just can't do this with you anymore. We had some great times, some great memories. I will look back on those kindly and fondly. I just can't do this right now. I hope you can understand. I have to go all in. Once I make that real, we'll pick things back up. 3, 4, 5 times. You know how many of those people are in my life right now? Not one. Not one. And you know what? I'm good. They're in my prayers. I wish nothing but the best. At some point, we're going to come face to face with that hot truth, with that crossroads of the people that are within our lives. We cannot underestimate their influence on our today and our tomorrow, because it's present. Once I'm allowed to stay on active duty,
I let my leadership know that I want to get back onto the teams. They knew this was coming. And despite that there had never been a one-legged guy to go back to an ODA, a Special Forces detachment, they gave me the chance to demonstrate my ability to do that. Threw the absolute kitchen sink at me. Ended up being about 12, 13 weeks of different assessments and tests. A lot of that was obviously physical, but they started giving me proficiency evaluations, cognitive assessments, psychological screenings. I mean, really did their due diligence, and rightfully so. There was a whole bunch of commanders that are about to assume an enormous risk by putting a one-legged guy back on a team that was going back into Afghanistan to conduct counterterrorism operations. At the conclusion of that pipeline, I was given the green light to return back to my team. I went back to the same one I was on when I was wounded, and about 7 weeks later, we were back in Afghanistan, conducting full spectrum combat operations. At this point, I am considered the first and the only Special Forces operator that's returned to combat as an above-the-knee amputee. Since then, I've deployed to combat many additional times. Most of my operational time has been in the Middle East and in Eastern Africa. And what I used to say is, I'll continue to do what I do for as long as I can, because I love what I do. But the truth is, despite how much I love it, I'll continue to do what I do for as long as I'm an asset to the person to my left and right. Because at the end of the day, particularly in this business, that really is black and white. You are either an asset or you are a liability. You either meet the standard or you don't. And if you don't, it's time to move on and figure out something else. There is no margin for error. There is no gray area. 12 guys on a team that are going to be sent behind enemy lines in the denied area to conduct bilateral combat operations against fierce adversaries. There is no gray. Asset, liability, which one is it? Our adversary doesn't care how many limbs we have. You either conform to that standard or you don't. I mentioned earlier we were going to speak on the how and the why. I mentioned a couple of the how components here briefly. This book in front of you right now really does answer that question. Those of you that were eager to read an autobiography or the Nick Lavery story are going to be wildly disappointed, because that is not what this project is about. This is a manual. This is a guide to goal achievement. This is what I followed in real time to do what I just shared with you. There's a lot of insights into the how in there. On our sets and reps and all of my fellow meatheads in the room that want to know grams of protein, it's in there, okay? Guys are good to go. I got you, bro. We're good. I want to take the last 3-4 minutes and address that second question, which in my opinion is a more significant one, and that is the why. Why did I do that, or why do I do the things that I do? And really, I'll be honest with you guys, it took me years to be able to figure out this answer. I had some cookie cutter responses when I would get that kind of question from people, just get away from me. It took me years of prayer, reflection, analysis to actually come up with the answer. There's 4 components to it. The first element of my why is the word faith, okay? The word faith. Now, I realize that the word faith has a very strong religious, biblical tone to it. It does for me. I'm an unapologetic Christian, for sure. That's a huge part of how I live my life. But it doesn't have to be. It's up to you. Our definition of faith is a firm belief in something with or without proof. Speaks nothing about a God or a higher power. That's not my opinion, that's the dictionary talking. A firm belief in something with or without proof. So I believe in some things. I'll share with you a few of them. I believe that we live in the greatest country in the world. I believe that to be true. Now you may be sitting there saying, you know what, Nick, like you're an active duty soldier, you kind of have to say that. No, I don't. I don't have to say that. It would probably be unwise of me to get up here and bash the United States that employs me, but I don't have to believe or share with you that I believe we live in the greatest nation ever. But I do believe that to be true. Part of what my military career has gifted me, amongst many blessings, is one we've already talked about, similar to becoming a parent, is the gift of perspective. I've spent time, as has many of you, in first world, fully developed nation states, fourth world war-torn disaster zones, and everything in between. And I can assure you, those that are unfamiliar, or those that want to second guess it, that this place right here, that most of us take for granted every single day, is absolutely 100% a beacon of hope of what is possible across a cold and harsh and nasty world. This man right here knows exactly what I'm talking about, as do probably most of you. The United States represents what's possible. Are we an imperfect system? Of course we are, because we're led and run by human beings, and not a single one of us is perfect. Have we made mistakes over the years? Of course. Go back history far enough, some brutal atrocities. But are we also babies? Yes. Have we also advanced what is possible on this little globe that we all share? By a mile. So I believe we live in the greatest country in the world, one worth dying for. Another thing I believe in is that freedom is not free. Does anybody in this room right now think freedom is free? I would love to have a spirited discussion about this right now. You can tell I'm getting all fired up. You sure you want to go down that road? Probably not. Okay. No, because it's not. Okay? I don't even think that's an opinion. I would say that that's a reality. Freedom comes with many, many, many costs. Blood, sweat, tears, treasure. Somebody is paying those costs. In fact, most of the people in this room right now are part of the people that have paid those costs. Somebody has to step forward. Somebody has to walk into the breach. Otherwise, all this right here, boom, gone, just like that. So someone has to go forward. The question then may be, well, who? Who has to go forward? I'm going to steal a quote from my man Edmund Burke, who stated this in the early 17th century, when he says, "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing." I believe that to be true. I'd probably tweak that slightly. This was written hundreds of years ago, and say the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. But I agree with the sentiment 100%. That is all that's required. It's for good people to do what you guys are doing right now. I'm not talking about you specifically, but basically sit on their ass and watch as evil conquers. That's all we got to do. So if we know good people have to step up and step forward, the last reference I'll use to explain my why and my beliefs does come from the Bible, comes from Isaiah chapter 6, verse 8, which states, "And then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, Whom shall I send? Who will go for us? And then I said, Here I am, send me." Someone's got to go, period. You were all amongst those that decided to take that step forward. I don't care what you did in the military. I don't care how long you did it. You were all amongst the 0.01% of this amazing nation. Most won't do it. You guys decided to. And I'm grateful for that. Why else though, Nick? Belief is great, but why else? The second component to that is I'm competitive. Anybody else in this room competitive? Yeah, probably all of you are competitive. I like to win. And yeah, as much as I like to win, I hate to lose more. And there is a difference. Would you agree with me? Right? Losing feels worse than winning feels good. And there was just simply no way I was going to lose under these circumstances. Having my leg shot up by a machine gun by a guy that I taught how to use the gun, who killed 3 of my friends, there's no way this is how this chapter of my life ends. I am going to find a way to come back. I'm going to be relentless. At times I will be completely and totally unreasonable. I will never quit. I am going to make you regret not killing me when you had the chance. You done messed up, AA Ron. You done messed up. Because before it was strictly business, and now it is personal, and I am pissed. Now you may hear that and say, you know what, Nick, that's actually kind of like shallow. But you know what, maybe it is. I don't know. You know what, I also don't care. Because that one sentiment alone is what got me through the first 18 months of my recovery. That's it. The third component to my why is a word I've mentioned already, and that's the word passion. I love what I get to do. And while I'm a bit of an adrenaline junkie, admittedly, I like jumping on planes and sliding down ropes on the rooftops, blowing holes in doors, shooting bad guys in the face. I enjoy those things. But that pales in comparison to where the true love of the game comes from. It comes from the people that I get to do it alongside of. This photograph alongside me is a man named Mr. Eric Emont. This picture was taken in 2015, top of a mountain in Afghanistan, my first deployment back as an amputee. Eric replaced me on my detachment when I was in the hospital, recovering from this. Once I got back to the teams, I rejoined him. He actually became my senior, and now we were teammates. 2018, I was in Lebanon on a separate mission. Him and the guys were back in Afghanistan. Eric and his truck hit a roadside bomb, killing Eric. It's the people is where my love comes from. I'm talking about some of the greatest human beings that have ever walked the face of the earth, you included. These are humans that are willing to sacrifice enormous amounts of themselves and push themselves to the absolute extreme limit of human capability and then somehow find a way to keep going beyond that. There are times in my career when I'm alongside these people doing it with them, and I just like sit back in awe, going, how did we get so lucky that we have people like this, people like you, that are willing to volunteer to put themselves through this kind of suffering for shit pay for a largely unappreciative nation, all based on this idea, an idea known as the United States of America. How did we get so lucky? That is not the norm across the world. In fact, this is wildly unique to the United States. There are people like Eric and people like you that are willing to put it on the line and push that hard for each other and for a belief. It just blows your mind. I have no interest in living my life outside of anyone other than that. And lastly, as to my why, is the sense of purpose I get with what I do. Many ways to define purpose. I'll define it for you right now as I see it. Being a part of something bigger than yourself that creates an impact on others. You see, passion is for me. I love what I get to do. Purpose is for you, or for them, or for somebody else. And in a world in which there are essentially zero certainties, some would argue, here's one that I've come to believe to be true. Is when you stack these ingredients on top of each other, an unwavering belief in something, a willingness to fight and win, a true love of the game, and a sense of purpose with what you do, as that word impossible that I've heard many times throughout my career, it begins to erode. It loses all credibility. It isn't real. The only thing that is really impossible are the things that you decide are impossible in your own mind. I'm pointing at you, the young people. You understand what I'm saying? That's it. Are others going to tell you that's impossible, or that's unlikely, or that's impractical? Probably. It isn't real. You decide what's impossible, that's it, but it's a mirage. If you want it bad enough, and you are willing to do what it takes to make it real, you can solve that equation. There is a way to get to yes. I want to close this out quickly. I know this is Military Appreciation Week, which I didn't even know was a thing until this year. Pretty cool. I hear thank you for your service probably more times than most people in this room. I think that's a great thing. I think that's something that we should sustain. I think it's outstanding. When I hear that, the grocery store, at the gas station, my heart is filled with pride and love and appreciation. I say thank you. Okay? I think we should keep doing that. I want to be very clear, because I will likely hear that again before I leave this building, and I think it's a great thing. As far as I'm concerned, I'm just going to speak for myself, but I'm confident I speak for others when I say if you really want to be appreciative of the military or our veterans, the way you do that is by living your life to the absolute fullest. It's by going big. It's by taking full advantage of the freedoms and amazing opportunities that we have in this great nation, because largely based on what our military has done, is doing, and will continue to do. If you want to thank me or a fellow veteran, live your life to the fullest. That's my request. Thank you guys all so much for your time, and God bless you all.